Hello, welcome back to a new episode of the Leading Yourself podcast. Did you miss me last week? I know I took a break last week. I was having some technical issues that prevent me from being able to record the podcast last week, but I'm here. I'm back with a new topic this week. Today, we're going to be talking about self-mastery and how to get into the journey to self-mastery. And as we will learn today, self-mastery is an ongoing journey, is not a destination. But today I'm going to talk about what it is to be in this journey to self-mastery, to know yourself, like yourself, love yourself, and trust yourself. So let's dig into today's episode. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, health and fitness coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves. Those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. Self-mastery is often defined as self-control or the ability to manage impulses and steer yourself towards your desired future. Self-mastery requires having a vision for your future, for yourself, and harnessing the will to realize that vision. Anyone committed to self-mastery must be willing to face their fears and break through their resistance. It implies an ability to identify the source of your own problems and the creativity to find a way to solve them. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Self-mastery is not about controlling, denying, or pushing yourself to do or be more than who you are. Rather, it's about getting to know every part of yourself and transcending the parts of yourself that you don't like to allow who you've always been to shine. Revolving the inner tensions between you and who you think you are and who you truly are, you're going to find wholeness and contentment and ultimately happiness. Self-mastery is a commitment to never-ending improvement. It's a process of becoming the best version of yourselves, and therefore, it's a journey. We learn to master ourselves by getting out of our own way. We are able to strip away what we're not to realize who we are and actualizing our full potential in the process. The best place to start your journey when it comes to self-mastery, in my opinion, is by focusing on yourself. So you can actually get to know the real you. Making yourself a priority. It's about finally acknowledging and accepting that the person you are destined to spend the rest of your life is you, nobody else. The person that you're going to spend the most time with, and it's going to be always there with you, is you. There is no better investment that you can make than the investment that you make on yourself. There is no other investment in other people, in other causes, in anything that will create a higher return in investment than the investment that you make on yourself. Investing in yourself starts with self-mastery, and self-mastery is about figuring out what drives you. What drives you to make the relationship with you, to have that amazing relationship with yourself. The healthiest the relationship you have with yourself, the more security that you're going to have in the face of adversity, in the face of life's ups and downs. When I talk about self mastery, what I'm referring to is, first of all, to getting to know yourself, because you will not be consistent with anything. Think about it. I talked about goal setting before, and I talk about vision and goals and dreams, and that accomplishing all of those things take consistency. And unless you get to know yourself, the real you, you're not going to be able to be consistent unless you're really, really clear, like crystal clear on who you are, so you can show up as yourself consistently. It's also about accepting, liking, and loving ourselves. Once you're clear on who you are, you need to embrace who you are. If you don't love yourself, you're going to struggle to be yourself and show up as your whole self in any situation that you're in. I find out that when we are in an environment where we're not able to show up as our whole selves, when we are holding back parts of ourselves, is because either we don't know that part of ourselves, or we're not accepting, liking, or loving ourselves the way we are. So, self mastery is about the foundation of getting to know ourselves. The next block is accepting, liking, and loving ourselves. And the ultimate level is to trust ourselves. I find out that many people don't trust themselves. They don't trust themselves with money. They don't trust themselves with responsibilities. They don't trust themselves with new projects and even their own dreams. We are so worried about trying to predict other people's behaviors and winning over the trust of other people in our lives that we don't start by just acknowledging and trusting ourselves. The only person that you need to trust is yourself. Because if you trust yourself, you will know what you will do regardless of what happens in your life. Again, we spend so much time, we invest so much time trying to predict other people's behaviors versus our own. When if we really get to know ourselves to the point that we know how are we going to react to certain circumstances, and we accept this ourselves the way we are, we're going to develop this trust with ourselves so we can consistently show up as our authentic selves with no regrets, with no holding any part of us back, and really feeling fulfilled and on our path to ultimately happiness. And that is what this journey of self mastery is all about. But it's a journey because as human beings, we are constantly evolving. We change. Look 5 years back in time. You're not the same person. You have evolved, you have grown since then. Therefore, we're constantly in this journey of getting to know ourselves, accepting, liking, loving, and trusting ourselves. And this goes in parallel with the same journey of becoming a better version of ourselves, to becoming that identity that we've talked in previous podcast episodes that we need to become if we want to live the life that we want to live or accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. That's why self mastery is not a destination, but it's a journey. So, I want to talk today specifically about that first layer of self mastery, which is getting to know ourselves. And I'm going to go back to a theory from Freud. Um, grew in psychology. And there's this theory of the two primary drivers of human behavior being, on one hand, the desire to seek or gain pleasure, and on the other hand, the need to avoid pain. According to this theory, which I fully believe in, all our decisions, everything that we do is driven by one of two things: either our desire to seek or gain pleasure, or our need to avoid pain. You are persistently being pulled into these two directions: avoid pain or gain pleasure. Many times we just don't take the time to take a pause and identify really what pain is that we're trying to avoid or what pleasure is that we're trying to gain. Anyone on a journey to self mastery automatically is assuming the responsibility to uncover how these driving forces impact their lives. And this is what is going to enable us to really get to know ourselves. You can start to focus on yourself and getting to know yourself by getting crystal clear on what pain you're avoiding in life and what pleasure you're seeking. And when you're clear on what pains is that you're trying to avoid and what pleasure is that you're trying to gain, you're going to become unstoppable, because that clarity is going to help you get past procrastination and handle any obstacle, criticism, frustration, or fear that comes your way. So, the key question is, how do we leverage these forces that control our behaviors to achieve self mastery? And I think of two things come to my mind. The first thing is figuring out how your ideal life looks like. It is important for us to take time to reflect by ourselves with no distractions, being open to all possibilities, not limiting ourselves in any way, to do a little exercise of visioning or dreaming. And giving ourselves permission to really express our most impossible dreams. This is about figuring out how our ideal life looks like. The most confident, happy, successful people are those that are pursuing their ideal life relentlessly. They are relentless in pursuing that ideal life. They're obsessed with achieving that ideal life. By focusing in your ideal life, you're programming your subconscious mind to believe that you can fulfill your dreams. This practice is all that you need to get clear on what drives you. So, in today's episode, we're going to be answering some questions, or I'm going to share with you some questions that you can answer to yourself to get you thinking about your ideal life, from where you want to live, to who you want to hang around with, to what time do you want to wake up, to when do you want to go to bed. There are some simple questions and some more complex and profound and deep questions that can help you really find out what is your ideal life. I try to do this exercise at least a couple of times a year because, as I said, we evolve, things change, and I always want to have a crystal clear view of what my ideal life is. And revisiting some of these questions that I'm going to share with you, for me, is just a reminder of how does that ideal life look like. So I'm constantly building and moving towards that. Many times, let me say this, we try to fit other people and other things into our ideal life. And this is very important to create awareness around as you do this exercise. Because when you're trying to visualize your ideal life, we are always tempted to try to fit again other people and other things. For example, if you, like me, are a mom or a parent, our kids is something that we try to fit into our ideal life. And you might be asking yourself, how is that even possible? They are part of my life and they are part of my ideal life. I'm not saying they're not, but a lot of times we try to figure out how to make our kids become the quote unquote ideal kid. How would they be? Because we believe that if they were a certain way, if they behave a certain way, if they did things a certain way, if they loved us in a certain way, that would be our ideal us. And we focus so much on that, on them, on those other people, our kids, our parents, our spouses, our colleagues, our bosses, and we're always trying to figure out how they need to show up in order for us to show up as our best selves, to be our ideal us, our ideal life. And we don't focus on how we can be the ideal parent, the ideal daughter, the ideal colleague, the ideal employee, the ideal friend, sibling, whatever role you're trying to, or whatever person or whatever relationship you're trying to quote unquote fit into your ideal life. You know, your kid is not going to be the ideal kid just because you want them to. And their ideal version of themselves probably looks different than what you think their ideal version is. The only thing that we can control is us. So instead of trying to fit in all these people and these things and these relationships into our idea of an ideal life, we need to focus on how we become the ideal version of ourselves that is able to live our ideal life. That's a lot of ideal, but you get the point. We focus so much on others that we forget to focus on how we can become our ideal self. And we make our ideal life conditional of other people, of other things, and other events around us. The same way that we project our ideal into others, other people are projecting their ideal into us. You know, we're constantly trying to live up to the ideals set by our partner, our family, our society, the communities that we're part in, the relationships in our lives. Your ideal life needs to be aligned with who you are at your core. So the question is, do you know who you are at your core? We need to live up to our ideal lives as defined by us, not as defined by others. So be true to yourself and be true to that ideal life that you envision to live. Check in with yourself. And if there's something that is not aligned with who you are, be okay with saying no. A lot of times we're so afraid to say no to the ideals that others impose on us or that society imposed on us because everyone is doing such and such. So we should be doing such and such if we want to be successful or if we want to be happy. No. If that such and such, whatever that such and such is not aligned with who you are at your core, it's okay to say no. And while in the short term, it might feel like you're missing out and you have this fear of missing out, which is one of your worst enemies in living your best life. The thing is that in the long term, you're going to feel so much more fulfilled if you say no to that and instead you say yes to those things that are true to who you are at the core. Spending some time answering some questions for yourself around how your ideal day goes like, how your ideal week looks like, how your ideal year or life looks like can really help you unfold your ideal life. And once it's defined, it will guide your choices in life and it will help you feel more fulfilled. So, anytime that these ideals from society come your way and you feel pressured to follow or live up to those societal ideals, if you have this crystal clear vision of what your ideal life looks like and how do you look in that ideal life, it will be much easier to push back and say, no, that's not who I am. I'm passing on this. I'm doing my own thing. Many times we see things in other people and we believe that we want that for ourselves. I've been there many times, especially in today's world with social media, that you go over pictures in Pinterest or in Instagram and you see people doing something or having something and you're like, oh, I want that. That is part of my ideal life. It's so easy to fall into that trap. What I have discovered is that a way to identify if something is really what you want in your ideal life is not is by how can I explain this? Is visualizing the process that will take to give you that. Meaning, what are the habits? What are the routines? What are the things that you need to do to achieve that you see in others? And if you can see yourself, if you can visualize yourself falling in love with the processes that are required for you to have or do whatever you're seeing out there, someone else, then it is something that genuinely you want in your ideal life. I'll give you an example. This podcast is a great example. I wanted to start a podcast. My motivation, I've shared many times in previous podcast episodes, selfishly to grow, to put myself out of my comfort zone, but also because I'm just passionate about sharing with others, mentoring others, and I wanted to reach out to more people. And the day that I retire from my corporate job, I can see myself doing this like my job, which now is more like a hobby, but and a passion, right? So I started to follow people in social media that are podcasters because I wanted to craft a vision for my podcast and a vision for myself as a podcaster. And I started to see people in social media and talking about everyone is talking about reaching 1 million downloads of your podcast. Is this grandiose goal that everyone seems to have. And I immediately jump to that and say, oh, I also want 1 million listeners on my podcast. I want 1 million downloads of my podcast. That is actually my goal, to reach to 1 million people, to have 1 million downloads of this podcast. But at the beginning, I just jump at it because it was a societal ideal, right? Is what everyone is doing, so I should do the same. Is what everyone is working towards, so it should be what I should work towards too. And I had to stop myself and think about, okay, Carolina, think for a second. Let's say that is your ultimate vision. Let's say that is your ideal life, that you become a podcaster and you have 1 million downloads. What would be required from you to get there? That would mean that, when I started my podcast, I was doing one episode every other week. And I told myself that is as much as I can do because I'm really busy. I have a corporate full-time job. I'm a mom. I have all these other things in my life. I don't want to commit to something and underdeliver. That is the last thing that I wanted to do. So I told myself, okay, I can commit to one podcast episode every other week. And then I started doing some research of what would it take to reach 1 million listens. And the thing is that people who reach that level, which are few, they typically publish 1 to 2 podcast episodes a week. Some of them, for a period of time, were posting new podcast episodes every single day. And then I had to ask myself, am I willing to do that? Can I see myself falling in love with recording a podcast once a week in order to get to that ideal? And the answer to that was yes. Heck yes. I really enjoy doing this podcast. It forces me to continue to learn. I'm constantly growing. When I'm talking in front of this microphone, like the time goes by without noticing it. And I'm on my zone when I do this. Hell yes, I can see myself recording a podcast episode every week. This is not a chore. This is a passion. This is something that I love. And the day that I don't love it anymore, it will no longer be part of my ideal life. So, keep in mind that getting to know yourself means having clarity on what your ideal life looks like. And when I talk about ideal life, I'm not talking only about the long term, but think about how will your ideal day look up. Think about or try to visualize a day in your ideal life from the minute that you wake up to the minute that you go to bed. Like, at what time are you waking up? What are you doing? What are you really enjoying? What are you doing professionally? What are you doing personally? Where do you live? What are the things that you're doing in your day? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you spending time with? All those things are things that you need to think about and really invest the time to think about, because that is going to take you to have a deeper knowledge of yourself and what drives you. This one is related with what are the pleasures that we're trying to gain. And if you're crystal clear on what your ideal life looks like, as I said, that becomes the standard and it becomes the tool to help you make decisions as you go by. For example, if you're in your ideal life, you wake up at 9 in the morning and you get a job offer that starts every day at 6 in the morning. That can help you decide whether that job is a good fit for you or not. This is a very simple, basic kind of example. There's more complexities to it, right? You don't jump from your current life to your ideal life overnight. You're going to have to make investments and work towards that ideal life. So there's more things to consider, but just want to put an example. Okay, so going back to this pain pleasure principle, this principle lies at the core of everything that you do or you don't do in your life. The decisions that you make, the actions that you take, the habits that you indulge in are all based on this principle. You are therefore who you are today because how you're interpreted and acted upon the experience of pain and pleasure in your life. You might, for instance, have a goal that you would like to achieve. However, to achieve this goal, you will need to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable, something that leads to an experience of pain. You think about the decision for a moment and weigh up the consequences of taking or not taking action. On one hand, you have this incredible goal that will bring you a great deal of pleasure. On the other hand, um, and you want to experience the joy of having that goal in your life, but you don't want to go through the pain of achieving this goal. Putting that on a balance and seeing where the balance is leaning towards is more towards the pleasure of accomplishing the goal or towards avoiding the pain that goes with the process to accomplish the goal is going to help you, is going to drive you. It's ultimately what drives your decision to go and pursue that goal or not. Until the pain of not attaining your goal becomes unbearable or the pleasure of achieving your goal outweighs the pain, you will not meet that life's goal. What do? If you're like most people, you make this decision based on the intensity of the pain that you're likely to experience while pursuing the goal. If you are unwilling to go through the pain to obtain your goal, you will never experience your ideal life, which is why so many people fail to meet their goals. But remember, the decisions you're making are not more than conditioned responses to what you've learned throughout your life. But remember, the decisions you're making are nothing more than conditioned responses to what you've learned throughout your life. Now that you understand how pain and pleasure influence every decision that you make, every action that you take, you can choose new habits to help you build the life of your dreams, that ideal life. When properly balanced, the forces of pain and pleasure, it can help you create a sense of urgency that you need to take the massive action that is required towards building the life that you truly deserve and you truly desire. Identifying how your ideal life looks like and the processes that will be required of you to achieve that ideal life is going to help you level up in all areas of your life. And this becomes an anchor. The other anchor is to get crystal clear on your pains. And I've seen many people that confuse what they've gone through in life, what they suffered in life, with their pains. And yes, all these are part of your pain. But what I'm referring here, when I talk about identifying and being crystal clear on your pains, is actually what are your actual problems in your life. We tend to focus so much, once again, on other people's problems. If I ask you what problems that your kids have, what problems that your mom have, or your partner have, or someone in TV has, you probably can list them. And we're so focused on other people's problems that we don't take the time to take a pause and identify our own problems. And when we do, and when we quote unquote try to do it, we stay so much on the surface level that we don't even realize what our actual pain is. A lot of people don't realize that the things that we procrastinate on is just a mask for our pains. We don't procrastinate on the things that brings us pleasure. Procrastination, bad habits, they're all covering up for our true pain. When we don't know what our pain is, we can't self-actualize. Like, we can't love, and trust ourselves if we don't know what our real pains are. It's so much easier to point out the problem in other people, and it's so much harder to point on our own problems and pains. Most people don't like to look in their pains because it's uncomfortable. So they stay on that surface level. But when you get to know yourself, even the parts that you might not like so much, you will be on your way to unconditionally love yourself. You will be able to solve your problems and you will be on your way to achieving your definition of happiness and success. Let the obsession of solving your problems consume you. Focusing on your pain is going to push you to focus on solving your problems and ultimately to focus on yourself. A lot of times, when we get to identify our problems, the next thing that happens is that we start putting excuses of why we can't focus on ourselves, why we can't invest time in bettering ourselves, in investing in ourselves. And we use excuses like, I don't have time, my kids, my job, my partner, my community commitments. Let me tell you one thing. All of those things you chose. You chose all those things in your life. They are there because they were your choices. So now don't use them as excuses why you don't invest time in yourself. If you really want to make yourself a priority, you will. You will find the time to make yourself a priority. You will find the way to make yourself a priority if you're really determined to work on your problems, on your pains. I can keep going on and I'm going to simplify the next part because I didn't realize for how long I've been talking. But as I said, when I'm in front of the microphone, time goes by and it's amazing how fast it goes. And not having been talking to you for a week, now I have so much more to say. So I'm going to simplify this part. But I have this 5-step process that I learned somewhere and I can't remember where. And maybe I make up part of it and adjust it to myself that I call the decision detox exercise. And this exercise, what it does is that it helps you declutter your subconscious mind to move towards your dreams. So it's taking time to reflect by yourself with no distractions, once again, being open to all possibilities, not limiting ourselves. And it's about exploring and decluttering our mind and giving yourself permission to feel a full range of emotions. And here we're working with our pain. So it can be uncomfortable, and we need to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So, in this exercise, basically, you're answering some questions for yourself about the pains in your life. The first step is very superficial, is asking yourself things like, what goals would you like to achieve? And then going a little bit deeper into what behaviors, feelings, or thoughts or questions are holding you back from achieving those goals. The next step is to identify the origin of those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So you're going to ask yourself, when did this behavior, this thought originated? What does it mean to me? And why am I allowing this behavior, this thought, this feeling to continue? On a third step, you basically steer the pot of your pain. And now you're going more into your emotions and talking about things like, what is this behavior or this thought costing you when it comes to your relationship with others? Or what are you missing out as a result of indulging in this behavior, this thought, or this doubt? How is this behavior, or this thought influencing how you talk to yourself, how you talk to others? If this behavior, this kind of thoughts of questioning or fears are not working for you in the present moment, how is that they're not working? What have they caused you in the past? And if you continue to indulge in this kind of behavior and thought pattern, what would it cost you 5 years from now? If you don't change anything, what would be the cause or the consequence 5 years down the road? If you are 5 years in the future and you look back, will you regret behaving the way that you're behaving, or thinking the way that you're thinking, or holding yourself back in the way that you're holding yourself back today? On a fourth step, we break through those unhealthy habits. To break unhealthy habits, you must interrupt and replace them with a helpful behavior, thought, or feeling. Basically, I know where I learned this part from Tony Robbins. He talks about interrupting a pattern. And that's basically what you're doing here. Your pattern interrupt can be a question or a specific thought or an action that you take that moves you into a more empowering state of mind. The pattern interrupt opens the door for a new and more helpful behavior that is aligned with those goals and those objectives that you want to achieve, with that ideal life that you want to live. So, asking things like, how would I behave if I had already achieved my goal? How would I think about myself, about others, and about the circumstances about me if I had achieved this ideal life? How would I talk to myself or to others if I had achieved this ideal life? What would I believe about myself, about others, and about the circumstances around me if I had already achieved that ideal life? What decisions would I make? What actions would I take? How would I define myself? How would I define this new behavior that, if I stay consistent at, will take me to my destination or closer to that ideal life? What is that new behavior that I need to install in my life that is going to enable me to get closer to my ideal life? And then the last step is to take massive action. And I think step 4 and step 5, I learned from Tony Robbins. Now I remember. But Tony Robbins talks about taking massive action. And that simply means that you commit to taking action until you get to the desired results. When you have absolute clarity about the exact result that you want and what pain you're avoiding and why you must achieve that goal, that ideal life, the next step is to take massive action to take yourself there. Okay, it's been a lot of talking today. That is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that you found this helpful or inspiring or motivating. If you like today's podcast episode, as always, I'm going to ask you to go to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. While you're there, make sure that you subscribe so you get notifications on upcoming podcast episodes. And with that, I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you here again next week for another episode of the Leading Yourself podcast.